You ever say something stupid just to get a laugh out of your friends, and then the universe decides to take it seriously? That's what happened to me. My name's Callum Rays. I was a cargo tech on a supply hauler called the Marlowe's Drift, and 11 months ago I made a joke to the most dangerous woman in 3-star systems. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me. And that look changed my whole life. I want to tell you exactly how it happened, not the version that got twisted around the station bars after, the real one. We docked at HFY for a 6-day layover. If you've never been, picture a station built inside a hollowed-out asteroid the size of a small moon, strung with lights that never quite go out, humming with 1,000 species passing through on their way to somewhere else. The air smelled like ozone and fried food from a dozen different worlds. Somewhere, a bell kept ringing on a 2-minute loop from a temple stall nobody ever visited. That sound followed you everywhere on HFY. I still hear it sometimes when I can't sleep. My crew, me, Priya, and an old engineer named Dobbs who'd been flying cargo since before I was born, we always hit the same bar on layovers. Place called the Hollow Draft, run by a Torvani bartender with 4 arms and 0 patience for nonsense. It was cheap, it was loud, and nobody asked questions about your cargo manifests. That night the place was fuller than usual. Word had gone around that a Kareth delegation was passing through, the Kareth being, well, the vampires. That's the human word for them, obviously. They don't call themselves that. But once one bored freighter captain used the word decades ago, it stuck across every human-run station in the sector, and even some of the Kareth learned to answer to it with a kind of tired amusement. They're tall, taller than us by a good head, most of them with skin like poured moonlight pale, but not sickly, more like something polished. Their eyes catch light wrong, throw it back at you gold or red depending on the angle. And their teeth, yeah, the canines are real sharp and they don't hide them when they smile. But here's the thing people get wrong from the old vids. Kareth don't drink blood to survive. That's a myth from First Contact, back when some idiot diplomat saw a Kareth healer taking a blood sample for medical scanning and ran back to Earth screaming about monsters. What Kareth actually feed on is something in the electromagnetic field of a living nervous system. They call it Shalin, roughly, the living hum. They can sense it, taste it almost standing close to you. It's intimate. It's why they don't like crowds much, why their nobility keeps such tight circles. Too much noise. Anyway, the delegation walked in, and the whole bar went quiet the way a room does when something walks in that everyone's a little afraid of. There were maybe 6 of them, guards in dark court leathers, moving like they'd never once in their lives felt nervous, and in the center, a woman. I didn't know who she was yet. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't some romantic fool who spotted royalty across a crowded room. I just saw a woman who moved like the room belonged to her, wearing a coat the color of wet slate, hair black and loose over one shoulder, and an expression like she'd already found everything in the bar boring before she'd even looked at it. Priya elbowed me. "That's her," she whispered. "That's the queen, Sable Verith Cassandra of the Kareth Compact. The actual queen. Here in this dump. Apparently she likes slumming it. Word is she does station crawls sometimes. Incognito." Priya grinned, the way she always did before she talked me into something dumb. "You should say hi." "Absolutely not. I'll buy your drinks for a month. Here's my problem. I have never, not once in my life, been able to turn down a dare from Priya. She knew it too. She'd known it since we were both 22, and she talked me into eating a ghrelin pepper on a bet that put me in the med bay for 2 days. So I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I walked over to the queen of the Kareth Compact, mid-conversation with her guard captain, and I said, "You come here often. I want you to understand, it was a joke." It was the dumbest pickup line in the history of pickup lines, delivered specifically because it was dumb, because I thought she'd roll her eyes, maybe her guards would laugh, and I'd walk back to my table a hero for having the guts to do it. The whole bar went dead silent. Even the temple bell outside seemed to skip a beat. The guard captain's hand moved to something at his belt. I remember that detail so clearly, a black hilt, no blade visible, just a low hum like a tuning fork. The queen held up 2 fingers. The guard stopped. She looked at me. Really looked, the way you'd look at a locked door you didn't expect to find open. Her eyes were gold that night, I remember, gold like a coin catching lamplight. No, she said. Her voice was quiet. Quieter than I expected from someone that dangerous. I don't come here often. This is my first time on this particular station in 9 years. I laughed, nervous, stupid. Well, lucky me, I guess. Lucky you, she repeated, like she was testing the words in her mouth. And then she smiled, teeth and all. I should have walked away right then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to walk away. But Priya was watching from the table, grinning like an idiot, and some dumb part of my brain thought, I'm actually pulling this off. I'm Callum, I said, cargo tech off the Marlowe's drift. Cassandra, she said, which I found out later, almost nobody outside her inner circle got to hear from her own mouth. Everyone else used her full title. She gave me just the name, easy, like tossing me a coin. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. I don't even remember most of it now, station gossip. Something about the terrible synthale the Torvani bartender served. A joke I made about cargo manifests being more interesting than diplomatic ones that actually got a real laugh out of her, sharp and surprised, like she hadn't expected to laugh that night. Then her guard captain leaned down and murmured something in her ear, and her whole posture changed, straightened, cooled back to royalty. She looked at me one more time. It was a pleasure, Callum of the Marlowe's drift. Yeah, you too, ma'am, your majesty, whatever the sorry. That got the second laugh, smaller. Then she turned and walked out with her guards, and the whole bar exhaled at once like it had been holding its breath the entire time. Priya was losing her mind laughing when I got back to the table. You flirted with the vampire queen. Cal, you absolute lunatic. It wasn't flirting, it was a joke. She didn't take it as a joke. I didn't think much of that comment at the time. I should have. We left Kesh Vanter 2 days later, right on schedule. Nothing happened. No summons, no guards showing up at our airlock, nothing. I figured that was the end of it, a good story to tell at bars for the rest of my life, the time I flirted with a vampire queen and lived to tell it. I was wrong, it wasn't the end, it was the setup. Here's something about the Kareth that most humans don't know, because it's not exactly public information and the compact doesn't advertise it. When a Kareth of noble blood feels that living hum, that shallan from someone in a way that's unusually strong, unusually clear, it means something specific to them. It means resonance. It's rare. Their scholars have books about it, old ones, going back centuries before humans ever built a starship. A once-in-a-generation kind of rare. Cassandra had felt it from me. Standing 3 feet away in a rundown bar, cracking a stupid joke, she'd felt something in my nervous system's hum that Kareth call Ethsha, the singing thread. And once a Kareth of her rank feels that, the old law is clear, even if barely anyone alive still follows it seriously. The resonance must be answered, or it will fade and never come again, and a piece of the Kareth who felt it goes with it. I didn't know any of this yet. All I knew was that 4 months later, on a completely different station, 3 system jumps from Kesh Vanter, my crew and I were pulled out of a customs line by compact enforcement. Not the local station security, but actual Kareth enforcement in that dark court leather, weapons humming at their belts. Callum Rays, the lead enforcer, said, not a question. That's me. What's this about? You are summoned, by right of resonance claim, you'll come with us. Priya grabbed my arm. Summoned where? By who? The enforcer's gold eyes flicked to her, unimpressed. That is not information for you. I want to tell you I fought it, that I was brave, that I put up some kind of resistance. I didn't. There were 6 of them, armed, calm, absolutely certain of themselves, and one of me, unarmed, still holding a customs form in my hand. I went. What else could I do? They put me on a transport, sleek, black, quiet in a way that felt expensive. And 3 days later I stood in the throne hall of the Kareth homeworld, a place called Velithara, standing in front of Sable Verith Cassandra, queen of the compact, the woman I'd made a dumb joke to in a dive bar. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked relieved. That threw me more than anything else could have. "You came," she said. "I didn't exactly have a choice." "No," she agreed. "You didn't. I apologize for that. It couldn't be helped." "What is this? What's going on? Your guys just grabbed me, out of a customs line. My crew doesn't even know where I..." "They've been informed you're safe and under compact protection. Your captain has been compensated for the delay." She said it like that settled everything, like money and a form letter fixed the fact that I'd been kidnapped by an armed escort 3-star systems from home. "That's not, I don't want to be under protection. I want to go home." Something in her face shifted then, not anger, something more careful than that. "It isn't that simple, Callum." And she explained it to me, the resonance, the old law. How what I'd felt as a joke, she'd felt as something real and rare and binding, at least by the customs of her people. A hum in my nervous system that matched something in hers so precisely that her court physicians had confirmed it within an hour of her return from Kesh Vanter. She told me that once resonance is confirmed by a reigning monarch, tradition holds that it must be either formally answered, meaning I'd remain at court, under her protection and her claim, for a full cycle, roughly 1 Earth year, so the bond could be properly assessed, or formally severed, which was a ritual that hadn't been performed successfully in almost 200 years and carried, she admitted quietly, significant risk to the Kareth party. Significant risk meaning what? Meaning the last 3 queens who attempted severance without completing the bond did not survive it. I stood there in that enormous hall, gold light falling through windows shaped like teardrops, guards standing so still they looked carved, and I thought, I said, "You come here often as a joke, and now a woman might die because of it." "So I'm stuck here," I said, "for a year." "You are a guest of the crown," she said, "not a prisoner." "Feels like a prisoner when I was walked in here by 6 armed guys." She didn't argue with that. She just looked at me, and for a second the queen dropped away and there was just a tired woman standing in a hall too big for her. "I know how this looks, Callum. I know what I'm asking of you is unfair. But the alternative is a ritual that has a 2 in 3 chance of killing me, and I am..." She stopped herself, started again, steadier. "I am not eager to test those odds over a bar joke, however badly it's gone." I didn't have an answer for that. What do you say to that? The first month was the hardest. Not because anyone was cruel to me, they weren't. I had rooms bigger than any apartment I'd ever lived in, food better than anything on any cargo ship, and a small army of attendants whose entire job seemed to be anticipating things I hadn't asked for yet. But it was gilded, and it was a cage, and every single day I felt it. I fought with Cassandra constantly, those first weeks. Not shouting fights, she never shouted, not once in all the time I knew her, and something about her calm made me angrier, honestly. I'd demand to see the compact's own laws on resonance, and she'd have them brought to me, translated, annotated by 3 different court scholars, and every single one confirmed exactly what she'd told me. I'd demand contact with my crew, and she'd arrange calls, supervised but real, and I'd hear Priya's voice crackling through some absurdly advanced comm system telling me she was fine. The Marlowe's drift was fine. Dobbs missed my cooking. Everyone was worried but okay. "You could let me go and just take the risk," I told her once, maybe 6 weeks in, standing on a balcony that looked out over a city of black stone and blue-lit towers, Velithara's twin moons hanging low and heavy in a violet sky. "It's my life. Shouldn't I get to choose what happens to it?" "It is your life," she said. I've never disputed that. Then let me go. If I let you go and perform the severance and I die, she said, very evenly, my sister inherits the throne. My sister believes humans are a resource to be managed, not a people to be treated with. The trade compact your species has with mine, the one that keeps 3 human colonies fed, the one your own crew's cargo runs depend on, she'd tear it apart within a year out of nothing but principle. She looked at me, gold eyes steady in the moonlight. I'm not asking you to stay because of what I feel, Callum. I'm asking because of what happens if I'm gone. That was the first time I understood this wasn't just about me. I hated that it made me angrier and quieter both. Things didn't get easier exactly, but they got different, somewhere around month 3. I started noticing small things about her. How she flinched, almost invisibly, whenever a room got too crowded. That sensitivity to too much Shallan noise at once, more of a burden for her as queen than for most Kareth, since a hall full of courtiers all radiating their own living hum at her was like standing under 100 voices shouting at once. How she read old paper books, actual paper, when she thought no one was watching, in a language that predated the Compact's common tongue by 1,000 years. How the guards genuinely loved her, not out of fear, but out of something closer to loyalty you don't order out of people. I started teaching her Earth card games. She started teaching me the old count dances of her court, which are less about romance and more about geometry, apparently, patterns meant to calm a mind rather than seduce one. We argued about politics, about whether her compact's strict caste boundaries for lesser Kareth houses were as stable as she claimed or just old cruelty wearing formal robes. She didn't get defensive when I pushed on that. She actually listened, which surprised me more than anything else about her. I won't lie to you and pretend nothing grew between us. Something did. Slow, and I fought it every step because I never wanted to fall for the person who'd taken my freedom, however politely, however justified. But you spend 8 months with someone, really talking, really seeing them. Not the crown, not the myth, just the tired, careful, occasionally very funny woman underneath it. And something happens whether you plan for it or not. I never told her. I kept telling myself it didn't matter what I felt, because at the end of the year she'd promised I could choose. Stay, formally bonded, or go, through the severance ritual now with better odds since the resonance had had time to settle. Her physician said the survival odds climbed the longer the bond was honored before any attempt to cut it. She never once pressured me toward either choice. That, more than anything, was what finally cracked something open in me. She could have. She had every kind of power to make me stay and pretend I wanted it. She never used any of it. Then in month 10, everything went wrong at once. There'd been unrest building for a while that I only half understood, a faction within the Compact's outer territories, human sympathizers among them actually, arguing that the resonance laws were archaic and should be abolished, and a much louder, much more dangerous faction on the other side, led quietly by the Queen's own sister, Aveline, arguing the opposite. That resonance claims on non-Kareth species were a weakness, an embarrassment, proof the crown had gone soft, and that the human problem, meaning me, meaning the whole arrangement, should be settled the old way, publicly, permanently. I found out how bad it had gotten the night 3 Compact enforcers, not palace guards but soldiers from Aveline's own household, breached the outer wall of the residential wing where I stayed. I woke up to alarms, red light pulsing down the corridor, and Cassandra's personal guard captain, a stone-faced woman named Rael, who'd never said more than 10 words to me in 10 months, hauling me out of bed by the arm. Move now. What's happening? Aveline's people, they mean to end the claim by ending you. Move. I won't pretend I was brave in that moment. I was terrified, half asleep, running down a corridor in borrowed court clothes while alarms screamed, and something that sounded like actual weapons fire echoed from somewhere below. But there's a strange thing that happens to you sometimes in the worst moment when fear just clarifies instead of paralyzing. We came around a corner and there were two soldiers, Aveline's colors dark red instead of Cassandra's slate blue, and Rael went down under a stun charge before she could get her weapon fully up. I was alone, unarmed, facing two trained Kareth soldiers with weapons that hummed low and hungry. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a heavy ceremonial urn off a side table, the kind of stupid decorative garbage every palace has too much of, and I threw it as hard as I could at the nearest one's head. It connected. He staggered. I didn't wait to see more. I just barreled into him, tackled him into his partner, and all three of us went down in a heap of very expensive antique pottery shards and cursing. I got one good hit in before the other soldier threw me off like I weighed nothing, because I did, to a Kareth. They're stronger than us by a wide margin, and I hit the wall hard enough to see stars. I remember thinking, very clearly, this is where I die, over a bar joke, and then a shape moved past me faster than I could track. Cassandra. I'd never seen her fight. I don't think anyone outside her guard had in years. But she moved like something out of an old story, precise and utterly without hesitation. And inside maybe 4 seconds both soldiers were down and not getting back up. She turned to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, her composure was completely gone. "Are you hurt, Callum? Are you hurt?" I'm okay. Rael, she's down the hall, she's breathing, but she'll be seen to." Cassandra's hands were on my face, checking, and I realized she was shaking, actually shaking, this woman who just dropped 2 armed soldiers without breaking a sweat. I should never have let this go on this long. I should have sent you home the first week and taken my chances with the ritual. Hey, look at me. I don't know where the words came from. 10 months of not saying it just came out sideways in the worst possible moment, in a hallway full of broken pottery and unconscious soldiers. I don't want to go home. Not if going home means never seeing you again. She went very still. "I fought you on this for months," I said. "I hated feeling trapped. I still hate it some days. But somewhere in there I stopped wanting the door open, Cassandra. And I think you know that because you've been watching me not leave for weeks and saying nothing about it." "I didn't want to press you," she said, quiet. "I promised you a real choice. I meant it." "I know you did. That's kind of the whole problem, isn't it? You gave me an actual choice, and it turns out I choose you." The rest of that night was chaos. Aveline's coup attempt collapsed within hours, once word spread that her soldiers had struck at the crown consort directly, which even her sympathizers among the nobility found too far. She was arrested by her own household guard before dawn, stripped of her titles, and the court moved with a speed I hadn't seen from them in 10 months to close ranks around Cassandra. Rael woke up furious mostly at herself for getting stunned, and threatened to have my urn-throwing nonsense struck from the official record out of pure professional embarrassment, which was the first time she ever made me laugh. 2 weeks later, at the edge of what would have been my full year, Cassandra asked me, not summoned, not declared, asked, standing on that same balcony under those same twin moons, whether I wanted to stay freely as her bonded partner, with every legal protection her compact could offer, including the right to leave any time I chose afterward, resonance be damned, because the physicians confirmed the bond had settled enough by then that severance was no longer a death sentence for her. I could have walked, after everything. I could have gone home to the Marlowe's Drift, back to cargo runs and Priya's terrible jokes and a life that made sense. I stayed, not because the law made me, because I wanted to. It's been 3 months since that night. I still fly cargo sometimes. Cassandra insisted I keep something of my old life, said a queen married to a caged bird makes for a resentful bird eventually, and she wasn't wrong. Priya and Dobbs come through Valithara space every few months on runs, and Priya still, to this day, cannot say the words "you come here often" without dissolving into laughter. People ask me sometimes if I regret that stupid joke in a dive bar on Kesh Vanter. I don't. Not anymore. It cost me a year of my life I didn't choose. It nearly cost me everything a few times over, and it handed me something I never in 100 lifetimes expected to find: 3-star systems and a species away from home. Funny thing about jokes, sometimes the universe doesn't laugh. Sometimes it just quietly decides to hold you to your word. People kept asking me the same question after everything settled down. So that's it. Happy ending, roll credits. No, that's not how real life works. I learned that the hard way, about 4 months into being an actual, legally recognized consort to the Queen of the Kareth Compact. Because it turns out surviving a coup attempt is the easy part. Living with what comes after, that's the part nobody warns you about. Let me pick up where I left off. Aveline's arrest didn't end the problem. It just took the head off it. There were still nobles across a dozen outer houses who agreed with everything she'd said. They just hadn't been dumb enough to send armed soldiers into the palace to prove it. Cassandra called it the Quiet War. No soldiers, no alarms, just years of slow political erosion, whispered in council chambers and trade negotiations, one small cut at a time. And I was the wound they kept picking at. It started small. A trade envoy from one of the outer houses, misplacing my formal introduction papers 3 separate times, which doesn't sound like much until you understand that in Kareth court law, an unrecognized consort has no standing to attend certain councils, which meant certain decisions got made without Cassandra having me beside her, which the old guard considered a small victory every single time it happened. Then it got less small. Someone leaked details of the coup attempt to a compact newsfeed, twisted just enough to make it sound like Cassandra had endangered the entire court over sentimental attachment to an alien pet. That word, pet. I read that article standing in our quarters with my hands shaking, and Cassandra found me there 20 minutes later, still staring at the same paragraph. "Don't read the rest of it," she said quietly, reaching for the tablet. I already did. She sat down across from me, and for a long moment she didn't say anything at all. Then, "This is what I was afraid of, Callum, not soldiers. Soldiers I know how to handle. This slow poison, this is harder to fight. So what do? We do what my mother did when she took my father's family under compact protection 200 years ago against half the court's wishes." She almost smiled. "We outlast them." Outlasting them meant something specific in Kareth politics, and it took me weeks to understand it fully. It meant showing up. Every council I had standing to attend, I attended, even the boring ones about grain tariffs on outer colony worlds that put half the room to sleep. It meant learning the old count dances well enough to perform them at formal court functions, instead of just goofing around with them in private. Because a consort who couldn't manage the basic ceremonial forms was an easy target for mockery. It meant learning to read the language on those old paper books Cassandra loved, slowly, badly, one character at a time. Because 3 separate nobles had made comments in open council about how the human consort couldn't even read the founding charter of the nation he supposedly now represented. I hated it honestly for a while. I was a cargo tech. I fixed hauler engines and ran freight manifests. I hadn't signed up to learn 700-year-old ceremonial law. But somewhere in the grinding tedium of it, something shifted. I started to actually understand the world I'd landed in instead of just surviving inside it. And more than that, I started to notice people noticing. Rael was the first one to say anything out loud. 6 months into the Quiet War, she caught me practicing count dance forms alone in an empty hall at some ungodly hour, because I couldn't sleep and figured I might as well be useful with the insomnia. "You're doing the 4th turn wrong," she said, appearing out of nowhere the way palace guards always seemed to. "Great, thanks. Weight goes back on the 2nd beat, not the 3rd. You're anticipating." She walked over, adjusted my shoulder with 2 fingers, no ceremony about it. "Again." I did it again, better. "You've improved," she said, which from Rail was roughly equivalent to another person writing you a sonnet. 6 months ago you moved like a drunk cargo hauler. Now you move like a drunk cargo hauler who's had some lessons. High praise. It's the highest I give. She studied me for a second, arms crossed. You didn't have to do any of this, you know, the forms, the council attendance, the reading. She never asked it of you. I know she didn't ask. Then why? I thought about that for a second, really thought about it, because I hadn't put words to it yet even for myself. Because if I'm going to be here, really here, not just as some symbol they can use against her, I want to actually be part of this. Not a problem she has to manage. A partner. Rail didn't say anything else. She just nodded once and went back to her rounds. But 3 days later, at a council session about outer colony grain tariffs, when a noble from one of Aveline's old sympathizer houses made a snide comment about the human's understanding of compact affairs. It was Rail, captain of the Queen's own guard, a woman who by all rights should have had nothing to say in that room, who spoke up without being asked and reminded the entire council, in flat, unimpressed tones, that the consort had completed the full ceremonial reading curriculum in under a year, faster than 3 of the noble's own grandchildren had managed it. The room went quiet. Cassandra, beside me, didn't say a word, but I felt her hand find mine under the table. The real turning point, though the thing that finally started closing the door on the quiet war, happened almost by accident, out on the edge of compact space, nowhere near any palace or council chamber at all. It was month 9 of that year, and Cassandra had to make a diplomatic visit to one of the outer colony worlds, a mining settlement called Voth's Reach that sat right on the border between compact territory and human-administered space. Tense place. Half Kareth settlers, half human contract workers, and a local governor, a Kareth noble named Bracken, one of Aveline's old allies, quietly still bitter about how the coup had ended, who ran the colony like his own private kingdom, and made no secret of resenting the trade compact that kept his mining operation profitable in the first place. I came along. Cassandra didn't ask me to stay behind this time, and I didn't offer to. The visit went fine for the first 2 days. Formal tour, formal dinners, the usual grinding ceremony of it. Then on the 3rd day, a section of the colony's main refinery, one of the oldest structures on Voth's Reach, suffered a containment failure. Bad one. The kind that, on a station that size, kills people if it isn't handled in minutes, not hours. I was closer to it than anyone in Cassandra's party, as it happened. I'd wandered off from the formal tour to actually talk to the human contract workers in the mess hall, because 10 months of council chambers hadn't cured me of preferring real conversations to ceremonial ones. When the alarms went off, I was standing 40 meters from the refinery's east intake, which put me closer to the actual failure than any compact soldier, any palace guard, any of Bracken's own security. I'd spent 11 years running cargo on freighters with reactor systems that weren't so different in principle. I knew emergency containment protocols the way you know how to ride a bike, not from training seminars, from actually having to do it twice, on ships where the alternative was dying. I didn't think. I just moved. There's a version of this story that's gotten pretty exaggerated by the time it made it back to court gossip. People love a good story, and the human consort saved a mining colony with his bare hands, makes for better telling than what actually happened, which was messier and far less heroic looking. What actually happened is I got to the emergency control station before the automated systems fully locked out, manually rerouted the containment field using the same override sequence I'd used a dozen times on freighter reactors, and held it stable for 6 minutes while actual engineers scrambled to get to the site and finish the job properly. My hands were shaking the entire time. I burned my forearm badly enough on an exposed conduit that I've still got the scar. I was terrified the whole 6 minutes that I was about to get it wrong and take out half the colony. But it held. Nobody died. 60-some workers who'd have been in the blast radius walked away because a cargo tech happened to wander off from a boring diplomatic tour at exactly the right moment. Cassandra found me afterwards sitting on the refinery floor, arm bandaged, hands still shaking, surrounded by human workers who kept trying to shake my hand or clap me on the back, or just stand near me like I was something they wanted to remember being close to. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down next to me on that cold metal floor, in her formal court robes, and put her hand over mine. "You could have died," she said finally. "So could 60 other people." I didn't really do the math on it in the moment. "Bracken is going to have to publicly credit a human with saving his colony," she said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't quite laughter but was close to it. "In front of every noble house watching this visit. He is going to hate that." "Good," I said, "let him hate it." That's the story that finally shifted things at court, more than any council session or count dance ever could have. Not because it proved anything about Carith law or resonance tradition, because it was simple. A colony full of people, half of them Carith, had nearly died, and the person who moved fastest to stop it was the human consort everyone had spent a year calling a weakness, a pet, an embarrassment. Bracken did credit me publicly. Through gritted teeth, by every account I heard, but he did it, because 60 of his own people's families would have noticed if he hadn't. The story spread through the outer colonies fast. The kind of story people actually want to tell each other, at bars and mess halls and market stalls, not the kind that gets managed by court scribes. And stories like that are harder for a quiet war to poison than formal declarations ever are. The newsfeed that had called me a pet ran a follow-up piece 4 months later, considerably more careful with its language. "It's been almost 2 years now since a dumb joke in a dive bar on Kesh Vanter turned into a life I never would have chosen for myself and wouldn't trade back now for anything. I still fly cargo runs sometimes, a few weeks at a stretch, back on the Marlowe's Drift with Priya and Dobbs when the compact can spare me and my hands start itching for actual engine grease instead of ceremonial paperwork. Priya still brings up, 'You come here often, at least once every visit,' usually at the worst possible moment, usually in front of someone important. I've stopped trying to get her to quit. Some things you just have to live with." Cassandra still flinches, almost invisibly in rooms too full of noise. I still read her old paper books badly, one careful character at a time, and she still pretends not to notice how badly. Rail still tells me I do the fourth turn wrong, even now, even after 2 years, because I think by this point it's less about the dance and more about having an excuse to talk to me without ceremony weighing the conversation down. And every now and then, late at night, standing on that same balcony under those same twin moons, one of us brings up Kesh Vanter, and the temple bell that never stopped ringing, and the stupidest pickup line in the history of pickup lines. I used to think the universe played a cruel joke on me that night. I don't think that anymore. I think it just handed me the truth a little early, wrapped up in something dumb enough that I almost missed it. Some things you don't get to choose, but every day since, the staying, that part's been mine. I said in the last part that it's been almost 2 years. I want to walk that back a little because I left something out, something I wasn't ready to talk about yet when I told the rest of this story. There's one more chapter to it. The hardest one, honestly. And it's the one that actually answers the question people ask me most. Did you ever really become one of them, or were you always just visiting? This is where I found out the answer. It happened in what would have been our 3rd year, right around the anniversary of Voth's Reach. Cassandra had been quieter than usual for a few weeks, not cold, never cold with me, but distracted in a way I'd learned to recognize. She'd get like that before something big landed on her desk. I figured it was council business. Grain tariffs, maybe, or another outer house testing its luck. I was wrong, it was about me. She finally told me one night on the balcony, our balcony. I'd started thinking of it that way without noticing, that the court physicians had come to her with something they'd been studying quietly for months. The resonance bond, the HFY, the thing that started all of this in a dive bar. It turns out it doesn't just sit there once it's settled. It grows. And in a human body, one not built the way Kareth bodies are built, that growth does something the old texts never accounted for. Because in 200 years no reigning Kareth had ever let a resonance bond run its full course with a non-Kareth partner. Everyone before either severed it early, or the human partner had simply, quietly, aged and died of ordinary old age decades before the bond ever matured fully. "What are you telling me?" I said, already knowing from her face that I wasn't going to like it. "The bond is changing you, Callum, slowly. It's been changing you since the day I confirmed it, and it will keep changing you as long as we're together. Your physicians on your side would probably call it cellular adaptation. Ours call it HFY, the turning." Turning into what? Into something closer to Kareth than human. Not overnight. Over decades. Your lifespan is already extending, has been for 2 years. We simply didn't have enough data yet to be certain. Your eyes will change eventually. Yours, she stopped, and for the first time in years I watched her struggle to find the next word. Some of what makes us what we are, it's transferring to you, slowly, permanently. I sat with that for a long time before I said anything. Long enough that she reached for my hand and then stopped herself, like she wasn't sure she still had the right to. "Is this dangerous?" I finally asked, to me. "No, the physicians are certain of that much. You'll be healthier, longer-lived, not weaker, but you will not be entirely human anymore, Callum. Not in 20 years, not in 50. And I never told you this was a possibility because I didn't know, not with certainty, until 3 weeks ago." Her voice cracked, just barely, just once. "I have taken enough from you already without your consent. I will not let this be one more thing. If you want the severance now, full severance, no more waiting, whatever the cost to me, I will do it. Tonight, I mean that." I want to be honest with you about what went through my head in that moment, because it wasn't clean, it wasn't simple. It wasn't some movie moment where I just said the noble thing right away. I thought about my mother, still alive back on a colony world 3 jumps from here, and how I'd age past her without ever meaning to. I thought about Priya and Dobbs, growing old on cargo runs while I stayed, however slowly, however gradually, something else. I thought about the word human and how much of my whole life I'd built on the assumption that it was a fixed thing, not something that could be quietly, permanently edited by loving the wrong or the right person. And then I thought about Voth's reach, about the 4th turn of a count dance I still got wrong sometimes, about Rail telling a council chamber my reading scores without being asked, about 2 years of choosing, every single day, to stay somewhere I could have left. "Does it change who I am?" I asked. "Not what I look like, who I am." "No," she said, immediate, certain, the first fully certain thing she'd said all night. "The turning changes the body over a long span of years. It does not touch the mind, the self, any of what makes you you. I would not have stayed with you this long, would not have loved you this long if there were any risk of that. I checked. I checked more than once, Callum, before I ever told you any of this." "Then why are you offering me the severance?" "Because it's still a choice that should be yours. Because I promised you a real choice once, on this same balcony, and I've never once let myself forget that promise just because keeping it terrifies me." I didn't answer her that night. I told her I needed time, and to her enormous credit, she gave it to me without a single word of pressure, though I could see what it cost her every day she waited. I spent that week doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I went home. Not to the palace, to Earth, briefly, on a transport Cassandra arranged without question the moment I asked. I hadn't set foot on my home colony in almost 3 years. I sat in my mother's kitchen, ate her cooking, listened to her complain about her neighbors and ask when I was finally going to bring this queen of yours home to meet her properly, like Cassandra was just any partner and not the head of state of an entire star nation. My mother didn't understand half of what I told her about the turning. Neither did I, really, not fully. But she asked me one question that cut through all of it. Do you love her, Meet? Yeah, I do. Then what exactly are you asking me for? I didn't have an answer. I think I already knew I didn't need one. I went back to Valithara 8 days later. Cassandra met the transport herself, which she never did, always sent rail or an attendant, because a queen doesn't wait on landing pads. She waited on this one. Alone. No guards, no ceremony, just her, standing in the wind off the eastern flats in a plain dark coat, looking like she hadn't slept the entire 8 days. You came back, she said, and there was so much held inside those 3 words I almost couldn't stand it. I told you I don't want the door open. I meant it 3 years ago and I mean it now. I walked up to her, close enough that the wind couldn't fit between us. I'm not asking to be severed from you, Cassandra. I never was. I just needed to actually choose it with my eyes open this time, instead of just falling into it because I didn't know how to leave. And now that your eyes are open. Now my eyes are open and I'm still standing here. I took her hand, the one she'd stopped herself from taking on the balcony a week before. Turn me into whatever the next 50 years turns me into. I'd still rather be that with you than be exactly what I was without you. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she laughed, actually laughed, wet and startled and real. The same laugh I'd gotten out of her once in a dive bar on HFY over a joke about cargo manifests, and pulled me into her like she was making sure I was actually real. That was almost 4 years ago now. I want to tell you the turning is some grand, visible thing, but honestly most days I don't even notice it. My eyes have started to catch light a little strange in certain angles. My mother swears she noticed it at Christmas and pretended not to make a big deal out of it, bless her. I run cold more than I used to. Small things. Slow things. Rail says in another decade I'll probably move like one of them instead of a drunk cargo hauler who's had some lessons. And I told her I'd hold her to teaching me the 5th turn by then, since apparently I still haven't earned it. Priya and Dobbs still fly the Marlowe's drift. I still join them when I can, though those trips get a little shorter every year, and I think we all quietly know why, even though nobody says it out loud. Some kinds of turning aren't just about biology. People still ask me if I regret the joke. I've stopped even pretending to consider the question anymore. I think about that night on HFY sometimes, the temple bell ringing its stupid 2-minute loop, Priya grinning at me like she knew exactly what she was setting loose into my life. I think about how certain I was, walking across that bar, that I was about to get away with something. I didn't get away with anything. I got caught. Completely, permanently, and it turns out exactly the way I'd have chosen if anyone had bothered asking me back then what I actually wanted. They didn't ask. The universe never does. It just hands you the thing and waits to see what you do with it. I stayed, that's the whole story. Every day since, I'd stay again.